Parliament, in the British Parliament, the MP, government minister, Jim McMahon, has stood up and named me a decorated individual with 20 years of public service to his country as a racist and far right activist because I spoke out against the grooming and gang rape of children. And I was very clear that the cover up was politically motivated because of the votes that we'd exposed and the relationships that the people who were doing this had with in delivering block votes, postal votes, so it's easily rigged. And I was very clear that these were racially motivated crimes because the reasons why they groomed and gang raped these girls was because of the demographic. They were white, they were working class, and they were considered an underclass. And the culture that these men came from, predominantly Pakistani, had those prejudices ingrained within their communities. And we needed to challenge those prejudices and we needed to call these crimes for what they were, because I come from a world of public service where we have been committed to this desire to safeguard children. You know, if a society cannot safeguard its children, if a society cannot safeguard its most vulnerable, what sort of society is it? I will give you three reasons. I'll give you three reasons in the context of the United Kingdom. The first reason is that it would be an admittance that the utopia of the multicultural vision that they pushed on us for so many decades is not the reality of the lived experience of many of us on the ground. It's easy for the metropolitan elites who do not have the day-to-day interactions that the working classes do to have that ideological position. So they don't want the reality. Yeah. The second reason, I would say, is because those who are involved in the cover-up, the leader of the opposition has also said so, are very powerful people who, if this came out, would go to prison. You've got the same in the States with some of the sex abuse scandals and stuff, so the very powerful people manage to keep, the legal system doesn't apply the same, does it? Law and order doesn't apply the same.
No.
Yeah? No, so we've got very powerful MPs that we have evidence that are neck deep in the cover-up. And if this comes out, if a public inquiry was to happen, then they would lose everything.
Hello, everyone. This is the first episode of Battlefield USA, and I'm happy to have you here to join me at my first episode for Urban Scoop in a weekly show. And this time, we are not talking about the USA, what we would think with the title, but the topic is too important and it's too horrible to not talk about it. And you probably already can think about what we're going to talk today. It's about the grooming gang scandal, the Islamic Pakistani raping gangs who are torturing, abusing, and sometimes also killing young British working class white girls. And I have the honor and the chance to talk to Raja Miah, a whistleblower who whistleblowed the immense gang rape scandal in Oldham, and he will tell me what his findings were, what happened to him when he started opening his mouth and start talking about it, and how the British authorities answered him. So that you don't wait too long, we're going to jump directly into the interview. Hello, Raja. It's a pleasure to having you on our show, and thank you for joining. And you have an incredible story, like 20 years of service for the UK and even got honored by the Queen. Can you a little bit tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. I come from a northern mill town, working class lad. Went on, did well in my life. Found myself sat in rooms with prime ministers, secretaries of state, served my country in the United Kingdom, traveled the world. And then I came back home. Somewhere in the middle of that, the last Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, put a medal on my chest for services to the country. Most of my work is in the field of safeguarding children and counter extremism, what we call counter extremism. I was working on trying to help shape and inform the fight against what we now know as Islamist extremism as far back as 1997. So 4 years before 9/11 is when I started doing the work I did. And of course, unfortunately, people don't listen. And by the time they listen, sadly, too many lives that could have been prevented from being lost are lost, and we're in a challenging and difficult position. So for a while, the government listened to me, and then over a period of time, the government, being governments, didn't want to listen to me anymore because the truth is always uncomfortable. Sometimes it's politically, you know, it's of political value to tell the truth, and sometimes it's of political value to hide the truth.
Yeah, that's always how it fits the narrative, sadly.
Yes, yes, indeed, indeed.
And
So I am credible in terms of the work I've done for the last 6 years. I came back by accident. Vicky, I came back to my hometown. My mother was terminally ill. She'd been diagnosed with cancer. My daughter had been newborn. Her mother moved back to wanting to live near her parents. And I had two objectives. One was to make sure that I was there to tend to my mother before she died. She lasted 5 years, and I looked after her. And the other one was to make sure that my daughter grew up knowing who her father was. And the reason we're having this interview now and I can't push it any later is because I will go and pick her up from school later. So,
oh,
I'm just a straightforward, uh, ordinary person who went on a life journey, developed a set of skills, and came back to his hometown. And then this craziness happened.
oh yeah, now I want to jump in directly with this craziness because now we heard that you have experiences and you have skills and you're an expert for extremism and for safeguarding children. And can you tell the audience, because most of our audience is American, so they maybe don't know what happened in Oldham, and you were one of the whistleblowers, so actually the main whistleblower about the grooming gangs, or what I would actually call them rape gangs
I
of
call them rape gangs. I call them rape gangs. I've been arrested and stuff for because, and I also call them Pakistani rape gangs. So we're very clear. So I'm quite happy to uh,
yeah.
uh, include the racial factor in this. So I came back home, and two things happened. One was the wife of a friend of mine contacted me regarding the mosque, the local mosque. The chairman was a convicted sex offender. She was scared for her children, but because the chairman was politically connected, he'd formally stood as a Labour Party candidate, had pictures with the Labour Party councillor, leader of the council, who's now the MP, Jim McMahon. All of this is publicly documented. They've arrested me many times, but every case has collapsed because I speak the truth and everything is evidence. So you don't have to worry about anything I share with you. So it then transpired he had Labour Party links. I openly campaigned and I had him removed. It was my mosque. It's where the mosque that my mother's funeral took place. I might not go to the mosque as often as people do, but nonetheless, it was a mosque that my family helped fund. It was a most powerful mosque in the community, and under no circumstances should the chairman be a convicted sex offender. I
So
mean, it's
you,
just outrageous.
okay. So to make it clear, you are a Muslim, and
Yes, yes, yes. I mean,
because a lot of people say that a lot of Muslim doesn't speak out against that,
Yeah,
but you
and I would agree with
accept.
that. A lot of Muslims don't speak out, and there's been a lot of political maneuvering in this country where the government portrays us as victims, and it's in our interest to remain victims, and the government portrays that only they can protect us because the rest of you white people are the enemy, and you will get us unless the government protects us. So it's a very classic empire style colonial system divide and rule. You're familiar, I'm sure your people are familiar with, with how that plays out. So I got rid of him. It was a very public campaign. Some of the people associated with the mosque tried to attack me, failed. And then this man got in touch with me repeatedly online, a man called Warren Bates. And it's important my testimony includes these people's names because without these people, none of this would have happened. Warren sadly passed away last May. I sat by on his deathbed whilst he was dying, and he was held my hand and said, Raja, whatever you do, do not give up on this. Please promise me, do not give up on this. And I went to see him the first day I ever met him, And to give you some context, Warren Bates is a former councillor, a local elected representative. We call them. We have councillors and MPs. The local elected representatives are councillors. At 12 years old, he was a miner. He's a white working class man. He was a miner. When I met him, he was in his 80s. He was a miner. He worked driving buses, driving ambulances, that sort of stuff. Working class man who was originally in the Labour Party, as all of us working class men originally were of that generation. And then he found that the Labour Party no longer reflected the values of the people who had created the party. And he went on a political journey where he eventually became the UKIP councillor, the UK Independent Party councillor, on the council for a little while. I didn't know him. I didn't know any of his history. And this man kept badgering me online. And I asked a friend of mine contacted me, and he'd contacted him as well. And they were both councillors before. And he said to me, Raja, please go and see Warren. He's not that bad. He's not as crazy as he comes across online. Will you go and have a cup of coffee with him? The first day I dropped my daughter off in school, reception, and so it's kindergarten, whatever you call it. The first day I dropped her off in school, I dropped her off, I got in my car, and I went to see Mr. Warren Bates. It took me half an hour to drive to his house. I went inside to be met by a very eccentric gentleman. His wife is still alive, very lovely, Joan, and he offered me a drink. So I'm looking at him and smiling. I'm saying, okay, can I have a
They're
cup of coffee?
somewhere at 5 o'clock, so
Yeah, a cup of coffee, 9:30, please can I have a cup of coffee? He looks at me and goes, no, in this house you can have water or beer. So I thought he was joking. I said, no, a cup of coffee would be nice. I got a glass of water.
okay.
Okay. And then he launched into a tirade about Nigel Farage, how he'd worked with UKIP, because Farage originally set up UKIP, you know, and I'm sat there thinking, okay, what does he want? He goes upstairs. It's a small house. He goes upstairs, comes back downstairs with a carrier bag. It was an Aldi carrier bag, I'm sure. And Aldi isn't like, you know, like we have tiers of shops in our country, like Tesco's, Marks and Spencer's. Aldi's the sort of more value-based place where
We
you go
have
and do your
Aldi too in
grocery shopping.
Germany.
Yeah, you know where you go and do your
Yeah.
And he gets out a big pile of emails, printed out documents, and he goes, read this, read this. What that I call it a dossier. What that dossier showed was that the BBC, that's the British Broadcasting Corporation, a journalist from the BBC called Kevin Fitzpatrick, had conspired with a man called Jim McMahon, who at the time was leader of Oldham Council. He's now a government minister. You know, he's one of Keir Starmer's inner circle, a government minister.
Okay.
How they had worked together to conspire to keep hidden news of rape gangs, Pakistani rape gangs, operating in the town out of shisha bars. You know, these sort of places where people go and smoke. And they were luring these young girls into these places.
Yeah.
And grooming them, gang raping them. And it's important I share this with you. In that email, it's made clear that it's people from the very community, from Oldham's Pakistani community, who had desperately gone to the BBC. And I later found out they'd gone to the BBC not because people don't automatically phone up the BBC, you know, when something's wrong and children are at risk. They phone the police first.
They should, yeah.
You know, and that's what, you know, and you'd like to think the police that got involved. They then phone the councillors and say, you know, please, there's something going on here. There's a process. They don't run to the media first.
There's an authority line what you should follow.
Yeah. So going to the media was a last resort rather than a first action. Yeah. And of course, the email clearly demonstrates how they both conspired to keep the news hidden. And they talked about, they used the funeral of Lee Rigby, who was the soldier who was attacked and killed in the UK by jihadists. You know, they
I heard about that.
Yeah. And they used that to say, oh, Lee Rigby's recently died. It's his funeral. We can't talk about this because if we do, it'll cause tensions.
Oh, that's the most famous excuse in your country right now.
It's outrageous.
Yeah.
You've got a report of children being groomed and gang raped and you want to cover it up. This is both the politician, the most senior politician in the town, and the BBC journalist. You want to keep it covered up because it might cause community tensions. It was absolute nonsense, of course, the reasoning. There's a whole host of other emails. There's a man called Hughie MacDonald. Hughie MacDonald was a Labour Party councillor at the time. He was in charge of safeguarding children. He whistleblew and leaked the email to colleagues in the education sector who were tasked with safeguarding children because they were keeping this information hidden from those who were tasked with safeguarding children.
Oh,
So
so
he
he was
leaked it.
warning them.
He was warning them, this is what's going on. We need to take care of our children. We need to keep them safe. He was suspended from the Labour Party and then eventually sacked and stopped from standing again as a Labour Party councillor. Hughie MacDonald at the time would have been in his 70s. He was, as well as a Labour Party man, a lifelong Labour Party man, he was the former chief magistrate in the town. So this wasn't just some nobody, a trouble causer. This was a man who was the former chief magistrate in the town, had served on the bench for something like 20 years. They sacked him, they sidelined him, and the Labour Party mobilised and brought in a man called Tony Lloyd. Tony Lloyd is now dead. He was the MP for Rochdale most recently. Prior to that, he was the police commissioner, the police and crime commissioner, and he was also a former Labour Party MP before he became the police and crime commissioner. Tony Lloyd was complicit in demonising Hughie MacDonald, and it's only been released now by the former Rochdale MP who kept it hidden until it suited him to expose it, sadly, because, sometimes it's politically of value to tell the truth, isn't it? Yeah. He
Yeah.
released, yeah,
And then
a
he
man
probably
called
only
Simon.
released what served him, not all of
Yes,
it,
yes,
or
yes,
only that
yeah,
what served him.
yeah.
Insane.
Released information, and his name is Simon Danchik. He was a former Rochdale MP who's now fallen out the Labour Party. So now he's happy to share the information because he's fallen out with them. He
Oh,
shared with them how Tony Lloyd had warned him to keep his mouth shut about the grooming gangs because it would cost them Muslim votes.
so it's all about the votes.
It goes to all about the votes. It goes all about the votes. So we launched a campaign. I used to write for government. As well as writing, as well as working all over the world, I wrote policy. I spent a long time. I can write, I can articulate, I can navigate the political system. I published a dossier online on Medium, on the publication Medium. Medium's based in America, isn't it? Medium. Yeah, it's owned in America, the writing blog. I published something on Medium. Lawyers went to the to Medium, and lawyers, I believe, from the Labour Party, and if not from the Labour Party, the council, went to Medium and had my article removed. It shared the entire dossier of emails and correspondence that showed how those in authority in Oldham had been complicit in covering up the grooming and gang rape of children.
Now the
Being the
question
man
is
I am,
why?
being,
Because
sorry?
no, sorry. My question would be now, why would they want to put down the article if they would not be afraid of being exposed in kind of way or being complicit?
Of course. And then what happened was the leader of Oldham Council at the time, one of the proteges, one of several proteges of Jim McMahon, the MP, his name was Sean Fielding. Of course, I'd published it online. I'd published it on Facebook, the link and stuff. And Facebook has an older demographic. At that point, I never really used social media, apart from wishing my goddaughters happy birthday and things like that. And I published it online. And of course, a group of elderly people went to the council meeting. We have council meetings once every 6 weeks and stuff, and you're allowed to ask questions as long as you submit them beforehand. They got in touch with me. I said, well, this is what you need to do to be able to submit a question. You fill in this form, you do this, you do that. They'll write back to you. They'll ask you if you want to ask your question in person. And they got excited. Yes, we can ask our question in person. We go in. A group of elderly pensioners, women, old women, went to the council meeting. The council filibustered, as in filled the meeting with other questions that were, from their own friends, from ex-councillors, from, stooges. yeah, stooges, to run down the time so the old women couldn't ask their questions. The
That's
old women
insane.
refused to leave. There's something about old women from a town, working class town like mine. They actually rule the houses. Yeah, they actually rule the households. So they're very forthright and uh, fool you if you want to try and manipulate them and mess with them. So they wouldn't leave. The police were called, and the police threatened to drag out the old women from the meeting.
Pardon? They,
The police threatened, made threats to drag out the old women from the
yeah,
meeting.
but it was her right to
Yeah, of
ask
course.
the questions, and they approved her to come to ask the questions, and then they,
This thing is brilliant now. Yeah.
yeah,
One of the old dears pulled out a phone,
and filmed it.
live streamed it on Facebook.
Perfect.
Right. Thousands of people watched it. The next council meeting, I went. I took with me 50 people. Questions were asked again.
Hmm.
This time, the leader of the Oldham Council looks around and realizes he's got to ask the question, answer the question. He stands up and he claims that the cover up of the grooming and gang rape of children in Oldham was barefaced lies. I repeat, or I say once again, barefaced lies. That document is online. I've shared it online. I'll share it again. I'll send it you so you've got a
Please.
copy of it. It's no problem whatsoever. I'll WhatsApp it you as soon as this is finished. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Barefaced lies. Of course, he was lying. I continued my campaign, raising awareness of why this was a cover up.
Mhm.
The police contacted me. Well, a friend from the police contacted me. He was all right, a friend called Matt. You know, you got to understand, I've sat in meetings with the most senior police officers in the country. I'm not a criminal.
Yeah.
So a police officer contacts me. He says, Raja, will you have a chat with our DCI? He's like the most senior police officer in the town. He's a decent man. People are scared of talking to you. I'm like, no problem. It's fine. Give him my number. I'll have a coffee with him. Met with him, had a coffee with him, shared with him everything I knew. He went away concerned. I met with him several times subsequently. As this escalated, the police confirmed they were going to launch an investigation into the stuff I was exposing. That report never came to light, in terms of the police's role in this. And the council at the time then started to openly call me far right racist and mobilize the mainstream media against me. So the
So,
mainstream media for a number of years has been publishing a series of smears and lies about me for the last 5 years or so.
so you are a racist against your own people.
I am a racist and a far right activist.
Yeah, but you're
In
not
Parliament,
in
in
parliament.
Parliament,
In parliament.
in
Wow.
Parliament, in the British Parliament, the MP, government minister, Jim McMahon, has stood up and named me a decorated individual with 20 years of public service to his country as a racist and far right activist because I spoke out against the grooming and gang rape of children. And I was very clear that the cover up was politically motivated because of the votes that we'd exposed and the relationships that the people who are doing this had with in delivering block votes, postal votes, so it's easily rigged. And
Yeah.
I was very clear that these were racially motivated crimes because the reasons why they groomed and gang raped these girls was because of the demographic. They were white, they were working class, and they were considered an underclass. And the culture that these men came from, predominantly Pakistani, had those prejudices ingrained within their communities. And we needed to challenge those prejudices and we needed to call these crimes for what they were because I come from a world of public service where we have been committed to this desire to safeguard children. You
Yeah.
know, if a society cannot safeguard its children, if a society cannot safeguard its most vulnerable, what sort of society is it?
None. And
And to look the other way, Victor, to look the other way, to 12-year-old children. 11, my daughter's now 10 years old. She's a baby.
Yeah.
These men were targeting 9, 10, 11-year-olds. This is outrageous. I
Yeah.
don't care who you are, what color you are, what religion you are. You've got to speak out
Hmm.
and fight this against this terrible crime. There is no politics here. This is outrageous behavior. You know what they did?
No.
They set up a police and Oldham Council operation. The most senior police officer told me he'd done this, and he left soon after because he wanted nothing to do with what was going on, is my belief. He was a decent man. His name was Jim Faulkner. I'm not one of these who just shouts and screams at every police officer. I'm trained by the establishment, Vicky. I'm a product of a multicultural society that believes that everyone should be treated fairly and equally. And when we come across prejudice and discrimination, then we tackle that prejudice and discrimination. And if all of those things have applied to me to help me become the man I am, then surely I owe it to everyone else to behave in the same way.
Sure.
Yeah. So he came to see me and they created something called Operation Hexagon. I'm very clear with all of this because I give you evidence. The reason they failed to put me in prison is because I'm very articulate, I'm very systematic, I'm very clear because I was trained by the British government.
Yeah.
Operation Hexagon
Hmm.
was a joint Greater Manchester Police and Oldham Council operation to come after me and anyone who spoke out in support of me.
So they created a whole operation
They
just to
created a
make it
police operation, a
a
criminal
police.
effort. Yeah.
Yeah, just to make that clear for our audience. So you are the one who tried to expose all that. You gave all the evidence to the authorities. You even talked with the authorities with high decorated policemen in a higher ranking. And then after they looked into the stuff, they started an operation to silence you. And
They started an
everyone,
operation to silence me, and I'll give you some
wow.
clear examples. And I'll give you 3 examples that I'm aware of. There are many more.
Mhm.
One was a man called Mark Wilkinson. He's now a councillor, an independent councillor, because he's gone on a journey because of these injustices and he wants to fight against them, and he's now in the council chamber. He worked in the probation service at the time. So these are young men who are, in young offenders institutes and he's trying to, make them improve their lives before they go on a life of criminality. Does good work. Former police officer. Spent 20 years a police officer. Distinguished man. The leader of Oldham Council, Sean Fielding, using official letter-headed paper, went to his employer and tried to have him sacked for speaking out against the gang rape of children. Another lady, and I don't really get on with this other lady, but it doesn't matter. She spoke out. Her first name is Jane, and please forgive me, I've forgotten her surname. She works at Manchester University. She's on a PhD scholarship, or was on a PhD scholarship. So a fully funded PhD program. The leader of Oldham Council wrote on letter-headed paper to her employer, trying to have her sacked. There was another Asian man called Miah, former councillor Miah, who was the person who encouraged me to go and speak with Warren Bates because they had served together on the council. From a different party, he was a Liberal Democrat. He is a senior level employee. He's a tax inspector. He's a high-level civil servant. This man, Sean Fielding, using his official capacity as leader of Oldham Council, tried to get him sacked. I think he wrote 8 times or 9 times to the highest level of government, trying to get a man sacked because he said the grooming and gang rape of children is wrong.
There you see how all is connected and how people try to silence you because they think they can buy you.
So who's going to speak out when they can do this and get away with it? The campaign continued. I've spent time in parts of the world where I've seen insurgencies work, against repressive regimes. So I've learned some things and I've adapted them and brought them back to a working class town that's meant to be, the mother of democracies. Yeah. And bizarrely, I'm using tactics used in dictatorships, in places of tyranny, to fight back. So we launched a campaign and we removed Sean Fielding from power at the ballot box because people are angry, and I'm saying to people, no, 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 we will win this properly. We will
Yeah.
not go to onto the streets. We will not attack people. We will not burn down buildings. We will win this properly. We will remove them at the ballot box and campaign for a public inquiry.
Good.
We removed him at the ballot box. His friends in the national press mobilized, called me a racist, far-right activist. I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, yeah. The next one came along. A leader called Arooj Shah, Pakistani woman called leader Arooj Shah. Now, all the time, as well as removing them, we're saying, we'll go away, vote for a public inquiry, have this looked at properly, and we'll go away.
Yeah.
I don't want anything, I've got a life to lead, I'll go away. Arooj Shah mobilized Pakistani gangsters against me, openly posted love hearts. This is the leader of the council. The leader of the council at the time openly posted love hearts in response to the offer of my murder.
And what happened to them? Like,
The police refused to investigate. So the police refused.
what did
Yeah.
they say? Freedom of speech?
No, nothing. They wouldn't come back. They refused to investigate. There were journalists linked to Arooj Shah who posted my photograph online and claimed I was a police informant.
Oh no. Okay.
Right? I went to the police. The police came back and said, Raja, you are friends with police officers. It could be construed that you are a police informant. I said, hold on. There are many people across the world who are friends with police officers, who
Yeah.
grew up with people who went on to become police officers. That does not make them police informants. But being a police informant, a snitch, is a very specific allegation.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the leader of Oldham Council sending Pakistani gangsters against me, journalists linked to her openly posting online that I'm a police informant, the police itself refusing to investigate, and then a friend of mine sends me a series of photographs saying, you do realize who this woman really is, don't you? She's a politician, the leader of Oldham Council, used to work for the MP, Jim McMahon. No, Raja, you need to be careful. Sends me photographs. Arooj Shah, the leader of Oldham Council, hanging off the arm, dating, clearly it's a date they're on, hanging off the arm of a man known as Irish Imi. Irish Imi is the getaway driver, the convicted getaway driver of the cop killer Dale Cregan.
Wow.
He's a convicted heroin dealer. This is organized Pakistani crime syndicates. Another photograph is her partying with a man called Zia Hussain. Not just partying, both have got red Labour rosettes.
The Labour Party
When they were
involved again.
celebrating an election victory, both with red Labour rosettes. Zia Hussain was kidnapped, was convicted for kidnapping, torturing a young man, including sexually abusing them, filming it, and using a broomstick as part of what he did to this young man. When the police arrived, they found blood splattered all over the walls. This is who the leader of Oldham Council, the second one, we were campaigning against. They told me I needed to be careful. I did need to be careful because the gangster had me followed home. His scouts were following me home.
Oh.
The police had to intervene because of how dangerous a criminal he was. He was convicted in a court of law. First time. Within months of her becoming leader of Oldham Council, clearly my campaign is escalating and gaining momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her car is blown up. Her car is firebombed. It makes the news across the world. First Muslim leader of Oldham Council's car is firebombed. It's portrayed as a racially motivated attack.
Yeah, so they claimed the
Yeah, as a consequence of what I was doing, I'd released an article. The MP, Jim McMahon, went to the newspapers. It's published in the Daily Mail, making an allegation that as a consequence of what I'd written in an article, blaming me, trying to have me put in prison, her car was blown up. The Daily Mail journalist got in touch with me via Twitter. I mocked them for a little while. And then I said to him, well, How can I be responsible for blowing up Aruj Shah's car when I published my article after her car had been blown up?
Yep. So they
All
wanted
goes
to.
quiet. All goes quiet. They still run with the story. They still run with the story and make it out as though I'm a far right campaigner who's now resorted to, inciting violence against politicians. Of course, the police can't arrest me on this. The reason they can't arrest me on this, and this is why I believe there's a greater power watching over all of us, Vicky, and why I've ended up where I think I was meant to be. It's not somewhere I chose to be. I did not come here looking for this.
Yeah.
I just could not look the other way when an old man put in front of me a dossier of files about the gang rape of little girls. I could not look the other way. A contact of mine, someone I went to school with, who went on his own journey and became a drug dealer and all those sorts of things. People make choices in life. It's not for me to judge. People make choices in life. He got in touch with me off a burner phone. Use some coded language as to why, so I knew who he was. Some event that happened in
Mhm.
school many years ago, and you know who I am. I can't
Yeah.
tell you. Yeah, all of that, and sent me the video footage, the CCTV video footage of Aruj Shah's car. Raja, you will need this. The reason I will need this was they were trying to frame me for the blowing up of her car, and included in trying to frame me now is not just the council leader, it's the police, the MP, and the national media. I released the CCTV footage. Social media has been a blessing for us. You can see why they're trying to close down
Yeah.
X and platforms like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
I released the video. The video clearly shows men pulling up in a car next to her car, opening the door, expecting to find it open, expecting the door to be found open. Suddenly, one scratching his head and realizes he needs to smash the window. So he smashes the window after the door's been open and nearly blow themselves up in blowing up the car.
Not really professional.
I released the footage. 3 years later, the police will no longer comment on the case.
Oh, did they apologize?
No, 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 no. It gets worse than did they apologize. They dawn raided my house. 8 police officers dawn raided my house,
But they.
arrested me, took away all my devices. You know that article I'd written?
Yeah.
That was after not before. They decided that article was racist.
Why was it racist?
Do you know what I'd objected to?
Yeah.
I'd objected to the growing Islamification, in terms of the how extremism was flourishing and politicians in my country were pandering to narratives that would make things worse.
Yeah.
This was long before October the 6th, October the 7th, sorry. And I talked about how there was a factory in Oldham called an Elbit factory that had a contract with the government. It produced these parts and it had some link to Israel, apparently. And they were attacking this factory. They were smashing it up. They were daubing, they were breaking the windows. And of course, the breaking of the windows of this factory wasn't just breaking windows. What I said, it's the crystal knacked. What they're trying to do is like it's the equivalent of someone putting posting bacon through the front door of a mosque. It isn't just there's symbolism behind what people are doing. Yeah, and
Yeah.
the breaking of a Jewish-owned business's windows and daubing red paint in terms of the blood deaths. I'm a history graduate. I spent my life working across the world. I understand symbolism. The
Yeah.
symbolism behind this. And we need to be concerned about the symbolism behind this. And the leader of the council should not be whipping this up by speaking at a public rally
Yeah.
where people are shouting Hamas slogans. They arrested me.
You. Okay.
Yeah, they arrested me. Said I had caused their alarm and distress, and that it was racially motivated, racially aggravated. I asked for the evidence. They had no evidence because they arrested me before they'd even spoken to her or interviewed her. They also arrested me at the same time for a second offence, which was a woman called Gail Hadfield Granger. It later transpires that Gail Hadfield Granger and Aruj Shah were friends. Gail Hadfield Granger, remember I shared with you how they claimed I was a police informant?
Yeah.
Well, Gail Hadfield Granger comes from a part of my world called Salford. It's a very notorious sort of, area. Her husband, Anthony Granger, was shot dead by the police. So they come from that world. Yeah.
Yes.
She was posting online, trying to encourage and incite people to pay attention to me, shall we say.
Mm.
Yeah. I objected to it. And I said, well, these people can say that. I release videos. I said, these people can say that. How can I be a police informant? Blah, blah, blah. And I went through, well, this is who this woman is. She decided that I had harassed her.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Of what she'd done to me and what she was trying to provoke towards me was not the police. Yeah. And she claiming to be a lawyer, she
Oh,
helpfully transcribed for the police a YouTube video or two YouTube videos I'd released. She helpfully transcribed for the police. So I'm arrested. So I said, have you got the videos? No. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to say anything. This is a politically motivated arrest, and it's because I have exposed the cover up of the grooming and gang rape of children in my town.
yeah.
You've come and arrested me. You've not even spoken to the people who, taken statements of the people. You've done raided my house, 8 of you in my house. I share with my 6-year-old daughter at the time. What on earth, what is this? You're here to intimidate me. Put me on bail. They put me on bail. By the time I'm home, the local newspaper has run an article of a man 48, as in me, and I'll get to why there's no ambiguity, arrested as part of a child sex exploitation investigation. They tried to make me out as though I was the one doing the
Crimes.
grooming, sexually assaulting children. The journalist, he's a man called Neil Wilby, who is an online blogger who's already been convicted in a court of law in terms of for malicious communications and stuff, for lying about other people. He helpfully identified me off the article, and then I managed to get hold of the information from the Oldham newspaper through the complaints process. I didn't win, but I got the information that showed how they had conspired together, and that one had encouraged the other. So one wrote man 48 arrested for child sex exploitation, and will be to his 5,000 or 6,000 followers underneath, but I believe this is Raja Miah. And then there's a photograph of the front door of my house.
Wow.
There's a brother of a councillor, Councillor Shahid Mushtaq. And again, you can see very clearly, look at me, I'm very serious in all of this, and I'm very clear in all of this. Councillor Shahid Mushtaq, who's now the safeguarding lead for the council in this town. His brother, a man called Tahir Mushtaq, posts online that I'm a gay Christian convert, or him and his mates post online that I'm a gay Christian convert, which is an incitement to the Islamists to come and kill me by making reference to me as a gay Christian convert, because those are crimes that can be, where the punishment is death in the faith I come from. I'm a gay Christian convert, and he posts my address. So if the front door isn't enough, he posts my address.
Yes.
Do you know what the police do? I go to the police, pleading with them. Remember, I've got a 6-year-old child here.
Yeah.
Pleading with them. Please at least release a statement. If you're not going to arrest these guys, please at least release a statement that I've not been arrested as part of a child sex exploitation investigation.
Yeah.
Please. Do you know what they did, Vicky? They
No.
placed me under house arrest.
Under house arrest.
Every night I had to stay in the house that was now a target for every Islamist, jihadist, and Pakistani gangster to try and come and take me out.
Yeah, but that makes it totally clear that you are politically targeted.
I am this is political persecution. Is this not political persecution?
It is.
Yeah. It's textbook political persecution. Why?
Yeah.
Because I object to children being gang raped. For crying out loud. They charged me, and for the best part of 3 years, I went from courtroom to courtroom. I couldn't get a solicitor first. All the solicitors dropped me because they have powers to and influence.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even get a decent solicitor first. All the big law firms dropped me, wouldn't want to touch it. I've got emails from law firms. We think this is a very interesting case, but we don't want to touch it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. By the grace of God, and I keep going back to this, by the grace of God, a man came up to me. He just happened to be, my daughter went to the same school. He was a barrister, offered to help. So I was going into courtrooms with one of the best barristers in the
Yeah.
country by my side, by nothing but, you can say accident if you want, but I believe in a higher power and there's something else at play here.
Yeah.
We, the first case collapsed in court. Arud Shah, leader of the council, ran away from testifying against me because she'd made her testimony up. She'd claimed that and remember at the time they arrested me, they never gave me any of this. She
Yeah.
claimed that my campaigning had given her PTSD,
Oh.
post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah.
Yeah, but what
And
that you could say the same thing for doxing your address and be living in fear that every night someone can come from
yeah,
Islamic extremists and
yeah,
torture you and kill you because they won't
yeah.
just kill you because being framed as a gay Christian.
No, there's darker punishments involved, isn't there? There's darker
Yeah.
punishments, and they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And what they did, uh, PTSD. And of course, if you ever see her, and I'm not a misogynist in any way. I've spent my life around very powerful women, and I'm raising a daughter, and I want her to be the most feisty, you know,
Yeah.
stand up for herself sort of young woman I want. So why would I be anything like that? Uh, she uses a lot of Botox.
Mm.
And there's a clear, my barrister when I came out, there's a clear connection between a lot of Botox and your face drooping.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she tried to claim that, that her face drooping, which is drooping long before I came along, was a consequence of me and
No.
PTSD. She then claimed that an old man had chased her down the street when she was out campaigning.
Mm-hmm.
The police arrested me on her allegation of an old man
You're not an
chasing her
old
down the
man.
street. Why would you not go and speak to the old man who chased her down the street
Yeah.
as to why he chased her down the street? They didn't know why he chased her down the street. I then pulled out by looking at the date of when he chased her down the street. I don't know who the old man was either. It wasn't on the evidence, yeah? But
Yeah.
it was a date. There was a date on the X of X. I was out campaigning and an old man chased me down the street. I hold Rajamir responsible for inciting violence against me or hatred against me. I'm like, what on earth? By good fortune or the grace of God, the date she was out campaigning and the date she put down was during lockdown in this country, during COVID lockdown, where
Yeah.
campaigning was banned. So perhaps the old man chased you down the street,
For
Arud Shah,
spreading.
because you shouldn't be knocking on his door.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had my defense prepared. The case collapsed. She wouldn't testify.
That's good.
She wouldn't be cross-examined, I think is what
Yeah, she
that
would not survive the.
no.
Yeah.
So why was I charged? Why did the CPS? Because being the man I am, I contacted the Crown Prosecution Service because they kept me on bail for 6 months before they made a charging decision. They kept me on bail for 6 months. So I'm contacting the highest level of the Crown Prosecution Service, the senior prosecutor. And I've got files confirming that senior prosecutors have seen the evidence. So if a senior prosecutor has seen the evidence, on what basis did they proceed with a charging decision? It's because they were politically pressured to charge me.
Yeah.
Yeah. The second case is worse. Gail Hadfield Granger, remember? She
Mhm.
claimed she was a lawyer, had
Yeah.
helpfully transcribed. For the best part of 3 years, I went from courtroom to courtroom where I refused, but the case stalled because I refused to proceed with the case until they had provided me the video evidence. The CPS tried to say, well, you've got the video evidence, you provide it. No, it's a matter of principle. If I am being charged on your evidence, it's for you to provide the evidence. It's
Yeah.
not for me to provide the evidence. Does that sound unreasonable to you, my
Yes.
analysis of that?
No.
Yeah. It's the same in the
If
state. So it's for
I
you to
claim,
provide the evidence. Yeah.
yeah, because I might make the accusation, so I have to bring the receipts to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And the highest level of the CPS have charged me, remember. They provided the evidence. It was over 2 years later. You know, a German after a German after a German. Every time I go to court, the newspapers turn up, take my photograph, publish it in a picture. Man harassing women, man doing this, man doing that. You can imagine what they're doing to me. Yeah?
Yeah, they try to socially
Yeah.
destroy you.
Yeah. When it finally gets to court, the week before it gets to court and we're ready for trial, we've finally got hold of the video that they've given us. We've looked at the helpful transcription from Gail Hadfield Granger that incriminates me, that they used to, charge me with. He said this here. We've transcribed it for you. She fabricated the transcription.
Okay.
The police hadn't checked to see if what I'd said is what she'd wrote. But worse, the CPS, before charging me, were duty bound to transcribe the video themselves and cross-reference it with the evidence. Do you know what they tried to do? She went off on holiday. Oh, sorry. She went off to bury her mother's ashes and didn't come to court.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The Crown
That's the reason.
Prosecution Service and the public galleries packed. Every time I went to court, 50 people, 100 people came with me of my town.
Yeah.
100 people of my town came with me. This is a decent man. This is an honorable man. This is a man who's fighting for our children in a way that no one else ever has. And we will not let him face these people alone. One man who died over Christmas, man called George Hayward, 95 years old, he put on a suit and came to court.
Yeah, but that
So
shows.
these were the people who stood by me. Yeah.
Yeah. But
The
that
courtroom is packed. The CPS attempts to proceed with the case by saying they just want her testimony ahead and no cross-examination. They put that in front of the judge to have me try and be convicted on whatever she says is proven to be true. The judge threw it out,
Okay.
fuming. 3 years from court to court to court, and the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, were complicit in attempting to frame me.
Because they were afraid of you about the evidence what you brought up, and like you said, when over 50 people from your town came with you to court.
Every time. Yeah. And no matter what they wrote about me, no matter the Islamists trying to incite my murder, because they were, all this time they're trying to incite my murder. Yeah. I'm a Zionist. I support Jewish people. I'm like, he doesn't believe in the eradication of Israel. I'm like, why would I want to believe in the eradication of a sovereign state? Or he's not on the side of the Palestinians. My position on Palestine is really simple. Having spent my life working around the world, in the end, peace is only achieved when people speak to each other.
Yeah.
You know, does that sound like the words of an extremist to you?
No, but it doesn't fit into the narrative.
The narrative, because the Muslim extremists in the communities I come from, voices like mine are dangerous within the very community themselves, because people like me need to be sidelined and removed in those communities.
Yeah, you're
Because
not fitting
people
into
like me
narrative.
counter their extremist narratives. And if people like me counter their extremist narratives, then they've got a problem, haven't they?
Yeah. And I have one question, because we had the decision yesterday about the national inquiry in the parliament, and 347 MPs voted against a national inquiry. What is your take on that?
First of all, that vote happened because of what we did in Oldham. We removed Darude Shah from power. There was a third councillor coming. Her name was Amanda Chadderton. We removed her from power. We forced the council into no overall control and made them write to the government, asking for a public inquiry. Jess Phillips, the Minister for Safeguarding Children, wrote back. Yeah, safeguarding children, wrote back and refused to safeguard children. Yeah, and refused the public inquiry. We escalated. Of course, it went on Twitter, on X. I released it on New Year's Day. The national news picked up on it. Then Elon Musk picked up on it.
Yep.
And we are ever grateful to him, if we're honest with you, because if not for him, this would not have got this far.
Yeah.
You know, and I have no issue with people with power exercising their power for the greater good. And for that, the people of my country, enough people of my country will be grateful, regardless of what the establishment says. And this vote took place. They voted down a public inquiry because they believed there was another inquiry that had happened recently and there was no need for this inquiry. What they didn't say, what they tried to fudge, what this other inquiry did not look at the grooming gangs.
Mm.
So you want us to take forward recommendations of an inquiry that did not look at the phenomenon of the Pakistani rape gangs that operated against the country. Now, many people who follow me have come back and said, Raja, what are we going to do now? We've lost. No, we've not lost. I'm a campaigner. We've not lost. We've won. And let me share with you and the people who listen to you why it is we've won. First and foremost, we have demonstrated how we can use democracy to go local democracy to inform and raise issues at the highest level of power. Because many people at our local level are completely disillusioned and disempowered. And we've removed councillors lawfully, legally, and we fought for this letter to go. So we've proven, as slow as it is, that you can influence, even if it's the writing of the letter, and we got a no back. The second thing is the Home Secretary. She's, the second, third most powerful person in the British sort of democratic system. The Home Secretary stood up and used these words: Pakistani heritage grooming gangs. Until then, saying Pakistani grooming gangs could have you arrested.
Yeah.
Now, in Parliament, the most senior MP to do with law and order, the Home Secretary, is using our very language: Pakistani grooming gangs. That's an acknowledgement of what's took place. During the debate, for those of you who watched the debate, the leader of the opposition, Kenny Badenoch, the Conservative leader,
Yep.
stood up and said the systematic grooming and gang rape of children across the country. The Prime Minister did not object to that. He did not deny to that. His argument and the Labour Party argument was how to deal with the systematic grooming and gang rape of children. So the government, this country now admits that Pakistani grooming gangs are real and that working class white girls were systematically groomed and gang raped across our country for decades. Those two steps on their own are massive strides forward for us in our campaign.
Yeah.
The third element is Kemi Badenoch stood up and clearly made the allegation that the reason they're denying a public inquiry includes the complicity of senior government ministers. And if you follow my work, I have evidenced the complicity of senior government ministers and senior Labour figures. And for the people at your end, I think it's important that we name them because we should not fear these people.
Yeah.
Angela Rayner, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, incriminated. Jim McMahon, Secretary of State of His Majesty's government, incriminated. Debbie Abrahams, some sort of powerful select committee chair, incriminated. And then, of course, Andy Burnham, the all-powerful Greater Manchester Mayor, who commissioned an inquiry that was actually a cover-up, and we exposed as a cover-up, where his own investigators have run away from completing their work because we've exposed the past works and they can't get to the truth, so they won't touch it anymore, incriminated. Some of the most powerful politicians in our country have been incriminated, and the leader of the opposition stood up and said what we wanted her to say. And now,
sounds like
because
a
you're
cover-up.
here and I'm here, there are two additional things that have come out. This is no longer a far-right conspiracy. And everyone that has been speaking out about this needs to be recognized as not some sort of loony. You might disagree with why we've got here. You might disagree with what the solution is to how we move forward. I can deal with those conversations. In a liberal Western democracy, we can have those conversations. But what we should never have been doing is ignoring what took place because it was politically expedient to do so, which is the systematic grooming and gang rape of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of little girls in my country. And this is outrageous behavior.
Yes. And then
And now the world knows. You're here. The world knows. The entire world knows. And I believe the entire world is outraged.
Yeah, it is. In like in America, they are talking about it. And when you watch some of Piers Morgan's podcasts, when he tries to downplay
it, yeah.
Downplay it, and even with American very famous people talking about it, that it is outrageous. And now my question is, because there is a lot of discussion about it, is it not only, or put it as an only, is it just a gang rape thing? Why do we have to put the information of the faith and the ethnic of those grooming gangs in it? And now, because they always say, oh yeah, but there are white people raping.
Of course there are, and I've had these arguments in my own community as people get angry when I'm very clear. Listen, these children were targeted because of their ethnicity. That makes it a racially motivated crime. It meets the full criteria of what we in the UK have as what constitutes a racially motivated crime. And they were targeted because they confirmed they were targeted, and the ones who gang raped them, who've been convicted, confirmed that they treated them deplorably because they were white, they were working class. And the men who did the gang raping also did so because they believed that their community, their faith, allowed them to do so.
And you say that as a Muslim, because there's a lot of communication
What?
that there
It's not the Islam I recognize, which is one of the reasons I'm fighting this. But
Yeah.
absolutely, and so we're clear. Again, I need to share this with you so you understand it. There is precedence here. Elon Musk used the term rape genocide apologist to reference Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister.
Yeah.
And you got a lot of stick for it, and she's been on the news in my country crying, yeah, crocodile tears, nonsense.
Yeah, she
The
said she
rape
got
genocide
abused.
apologist,
Mhm.
the rape genocide is a tactic, historically documented tactic used by West Pakistan on East Pakistan in the 70s. So in the forming of Bangladesh, the West Pakistan, now modern day Pakistan, sent the soldiers over, and as part of the genocide, they killed 3 million people in 9 months. So we're clear. They killed 3 million people in 9 months, and they raped, and this is in the United Nations archives. You'll find all this information. This is not a far-right conspiracy or anything like that. The conservative estimates are something between 300,000 and 500,000 rape genocides over a period of 9 months. And the strategy was to breed out, if you can't kill them, kill all the men and breed out the women. So the ethnic race is cleansed. And the motivation, the legitimacy given at the time by the clerics in Pakistan was that the Bengali ethnic group are racially inferior, and also the practice of Islam has been infiltrated by India, so they're not really true Muslims. Now you translate that belief system and superimpose it on the attitudes and what took place with the white working class girls, and it is identical from an identical demographic.
But why do you think everyone wants to shut up about that? Because they don't want to start that people in everywhere in the world, because we have those problems everywhere. Like in a lot of European countries, when you look into France, into Germany, into Italy, this
I will give you 3 reasons. I'll give you 3
Yeah.
reasons in the context of the United Kingdom. The first reason is that it would be an admittance that the utopia of the multicultural vision that they pushed on us for so many decades is not the reality of the lived experience of many of us on the ground. It's easy for the metropolitan elite who do not have the day-to-day interactions that the working classes do to have that ideological position. So they don't want the reality or, the perception of what the world looks like challenged is the first reason I'd give you. And I think that would be the same in many other of the
Yeah, you
countries.
can put that in like that would explain a lot also in Germany and France, because the higher educated or higher political class, they never go into those areas in the cities where that happens.
Yeah. The second reason I would say is because those who are involved in the cover-up, the leader of the opposition has also said so, are very powerful people who, if this came out, would go to prison. You've got the same in the States with some of the sex abuse scandals and stuff, so the very powerful people manage to keep, legal system doesn't apply the same, does it? Law and order doesn't apply the same.
No.
Yeah. No, so we've got very powerful MPs that we have evidence that are neck deep in the cover-up. And if this comes out, if a public inquiry was to happen, then they would lose everything.
And that can't happen.
Yeah. And the third reason, and this is where it gets dangerous, it goes back to the Pakistani gangsters. The Pakistani gangsters, the cartels, the families are set up in a structure where one is a heroin dealer, one is a businessman that cleans up the money, and one is a politician. It's like something out of 1930s America. This pattern is emulated across the United Kingdom, and they are controlling more and more of the local councils. The MPs are reliant on the votes that these people supply because it's postal votes, endemic postal vote fraud, and postal vote harvesting. And these people, if they're selling drugs, they're also selling children. And it's one criminal, mess. That
Yeah, it's an
it's a
industry.
sort of Elliot Ness sort of thing. Yeah, yeah,
It's kind of a crime industry. You see that,
yeah.
like I expose a lot of child sex trafficking at the US-Mexican border with the Venezuelan cartels and the Mexican cartels. This it looks like the same kind of a criminal industry, what they have. It's like a criminal
They're
empire.
not pedophiles. These aren't pedophiles. In terms of the sex gangs, like some of the white sex gangs you talk about, that's about an attraction to children and child abuse. Yeah, these
Yeah,
people aren't abusing children. They don't see them as children. Some see them as fair game because where they come from, they're old enough to have sex with them. Yeah,
yeah,
some see them as inferior. So who cares? They're less subhuman, so we can treat them like trash. And some see them as no different to selling heroin.
yeah. A
And then there are
product.
those who peddle these children, knowing that as a result they control votes, and controlling votes gives them access to power.
Yeah, it's all
And
about
I
power.
say this to you as a former government advisor. I don't say this to you as some nutter who's walked down the street. I am a man who's worked at the highest level of government in my country. And I see this for what it is. And we need a public inquiry. In fact, we've gone beyond a public inquiry because yesterday we knew we were going to lose the vote, but our win was exposing those things where we've got a global audience, and the government is now using our language. The government is now using our language. That's a massive win. Our next step is, if you remember South Africa and places like that, where the state had committed heinous crimes against its citizens, they had to create these commissions, truth and justice commissions or truth and reconciliation commissions. The United Kingdom now needs a truth and justice commission to investigate the systematic grooming and gang rape of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of its children.
Aren't you not afraid that they can be infiltrated and maybe misleaded in those investigations because they get infiltrated by those powerful people?
Of course, but we've got to fight. Or else what do we do, Vicky? We've
Yeah.
got to fight. And we've been fighting for 6 years. They've tried to kill me. They've tried to imprison me. Here I still am. And you and I are now talking, and you and I would never have met and never have this conversation. And the people who are listening to you would never have come across me if not our shared belief that injustice cannot be ignored. And we are duty bound to stand for the most vulnerable in society. And what sort of society are we living in if we cannot protect our children?
Thank you. I don't really know what to say because it's right now the most important topic people talk about all over social media and mostly on X, and we can be all very thankful to Elon Musk who gives us the
Yes.
platform. Do you maybe have a message to the audience to keep the fight? Because
Yeah, no, absolutely. When we started, I knew I had an appreciation of what I was letting myself in for. And even then, and you and I had the conversation just before you started, you've got to look at yourself in the mirror. Every day you've got to look at yourself in the mirror. And my message to myself and my message to my community who has come forward, the people of my town is what I mean when I say my community, the people of my town, and now people across the entire country and now growing number across the world, is a simple one. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
so that was the amazing interview with Raja, and I still can't believe what I heard. And it's incredible, insane what is happening in the UK, how far the Labour Party is involved in Oldham in this horrible crimes to the children. And we heard that asking if it's actually a racial and religious crime, a hate crime. We heard about from Raja, who is Muslim. Yes, it is. So every excuse and every word throwing of Islamophobia can't be here anymore, because we know from now on that these crimes are in an industrial scale, and it's not just about pedophilia. It's about destroying thousands of lives of working class, young, white British girls. And I want to end this episode with a great thank you for listening. And I hope you're gonna jump in next week when it's again Battlefield USA. And we will talk more about American topics. But in my opinion, we can't just not talk about this scandal, and we have to make it everyone aware about it, because if we stop speaking about it, they won't stop doing it. Thank you very much.